compliant. Data Protection Matters is hosted by Chuck Cameron, founder of Design Privacy, your trusted partner in data protection. Don't miss out. That's every Tuesday morning at 8:20 and every Thursday at 8:25 a.m. Stay protected, stay informed with Nationwide 90 FM and Design Privacy.
What's everyone talking about? It's Front Page in This Morning. Get the issue of the day this and every weekday morning at 7:20 a.m. on Front Page. This Morning. Morning radio the right way. Front Page is brought to you by ABC Electrical for a better choice in the electrical business.
It's Monday. Get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
The E-Zone is here for you.
With the Stinger Honeybee.
And Karim Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you say?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezone blinddates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblindates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a touch, what a job. Oh, what a peace. How good this country could be.
Happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice with JFJ's team. We're starting the show with a particular mood and tone that the country is going through, and we give God thanks. And we continue to pray with those who were adversely affected by Hurricane Melissa. And today we're going to be discussing an important topic. Jade, you perhaps have it readily at hand.
Yes.
The topic that we're discussing around climate justice.
Right, yes, we're discussing environmental justice after Hurricane Melissa, climate change, inequality, and Jamaica's future. And we're going to be joined by Executive Director of JET, Dr. Teresa Rodriguez-Moody, and Professor of Climate Science and Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies, Professor Michael Taylor.
Yeah. All right. So just before we get into the topic, I want to say on behalf of JFJ that the Jamaican government, in my humble estimation, have been doing a stellar job in light of what is currently facing the country. Leading up to the hurricane, I think the country was being given good information, timely updates from the relevant state agencies, the Prime Minister and his cabinet having, conferences every few hours to guide us through this devastating hurricane. And we are now seeing the type of coordination. You see, for example, Minister Vaz, Minister Desmond McKenzie, the leader of the opposition and his team as well, on the ground, coordinating efforts. So we extend our heartfelt thanks to the government of Jamaica. And I think I will leave it to the experts to determine whether or not we may need external technical support. because while we want to ensure that we collectively respond to the crisis facing many at this moment, we're going to need a response in the long haul. This is not something that we will get up next week. Roads will be cleared, light posts back up and so on. You're talking about rebuilding. And before we get into the show, one of the things, Jade, just for 2 minutes or so, I want us to quickly discuss is the human rights implications for those who have been affected. And the human rights implications span several areas. You're going to be finding labor exploitation because people will lose work. Unfortunately, you will have some companies who will seek to exploit that. You will have companies who will seek to employ the unemployed for rates that are below the minimum wage. You will see prices being inflated. And these are just some of the things that I think the government, I know they have passed an order, I believe, was signed by the Prime Minister. But one of the things we look at, having learned from the Haiti experience in 2010, how do we ensure, as a matter of policy and law, that some of these things, if they happen, whatever company may be involved, they are severely dealt with by the state. I want us to also spare a thought to women and children who have been displaced, who are at risk of sexual predators. I've spoken to 2 NGO partners, one of whom indicated so far of domestic violence happening even in a space of devastation. So you have sexual violence that will happen. And as we reach out to the communities, one of the things we are cognizant of that some families can't afford to even go where the aid is because they have to consider that they can't leave their children because you do have sexual predators around. I want us to continue this discussion post our interview, Jade, because we do have certain vulnerable groups, persons living with HIV, for example, who have been marooned in communities, displaced without their medication, so they are unable to adhere to their treatment regimen if it is that their medication is out. So it's a devastating effect that we're seeing, but let's have more discussion on this, but we have to press on with the program. All right?
Thank you for that, Mikhail. Okay, so quickly, we do have a right of the week as well as a trivia question for this week. So the right of the week is the right to a healthy and productive environment, free from the threat of injury or damage from environmental abuse. And this is one of our rights in the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms 2011. It means that every person is entitled to live in surroundings that support their health, safety, and well-being. This includes the right to free air, safe water, and unpolluted land, as well as the preservation of natural resources and ecosystems on which life depends. It also means that individuals, companies, and the state have a responsibility to use the environment in a sustainable way, avoid practices that cause harm, pollution, or long-term damage to the country's natural heritage. We also have a trivia question for today, which is: in which year did Jamaica sign and in which year did Jamaica ratify the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change? So there are 2 different years. Which year did we sign it and which year did we ratify the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change? You can respond in the chat on Nationwide's YouTube channel. You can send us a WhatsApp at 2397583, or you can respond to our Instagram at JA4Justice. Yes. So, our topic for today, as we said, is environmental justice after Hurricane Melissa, climate change, inequality, and Jamaica's future. And in just over a year, this would have been the second major hurricane that the country would have experienced, and it highlights the exposure that the country has to climate risks. Each storm has put in context environmental stressors, economic inequality, uneven infrastructure investment, as well as limited adaptive capacity to which magnifies the human and economic toll of disasters. Now, Jamaica's climate vulnerability is not only shaped by the frequency of the storms, but also our physical geography, development patterns, and resource constraints. So we saw some research from the UNDP that showed that around 70% of Jamaica's population and over 50% of the country's economic assets are located in coastal zones, which are most vulnerable to hurricanes, storm surges, and rising sea levels. And the infrastructure in these areas, from that same research, would have been further weakened by the coastal settlement as well as the rapid rise in tourism-based development. So,
yeah,
yes.
and you know, one of the things that we're going to be discussing with our guest in short order, I hear conversations about whether it's man-made, and I'm sure people are not asking that question within the context of, not being intellectually sound,
Right.
but just the reality of the bigger countries, their climate action and inaction.
Yes.
Are they doing enough? And I can say no before we even get our experts on. How do we remain resilient amidst an environment that we ourselves, we're not contributing to what we're seeing now and the devastation facing small island development states such as Jamaica? What else can Jamaica do? Are there any treaties that we need to ratify as a country? What can we do as we rebuild, use the opportunity? And I use the word opportunity here, very cognizant again of the catastrophic effects that it has had on the Western Island. But what can we do as we rebuild? So we're going to be joined by Dr. Teresa Rodriguez Moody, who is the head of Jamaica Environment Trust, and
Professor Michael Taylor of the University of the West Indies. Are they on with us as yet? Okay, great. But we are right up on the break as well. So do we take the break?
Yes,
and
we
come
take the
back?
break and then we just get right into it.
On Monday, November 10, tune in to Cliff Hughes Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. when LASCO, in partnership with the Jamaica Constabulary Force, proudly announces the Super 6 finalists for the 2025 Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Awards. Meet the Super 6, Jamaica's finest: Constable Monique Bartley, Corporal Stephen Smith, Corporal Rojan Holt, Detective Corporal Chadwick Williams, Constable Chantal Powell, and Detective Corporal Livy Evans. Finalists for the prestigious 2025 LASCO JCF Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Award. Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online as we highlight and celebrate the outstanding service, leadership, and community impact of the Super 6. So tune in to Cliff Hughes Online Monday, November 10 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's the Super 6 finalists for the 2025 Saluting Our Heroes Police of the Year Awards. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Lasco Chin Foundation and the Jamaica Constabulary Force.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing climate change, inequality, and Jamaica's future in the context of Hurricane Melissa. We are joined by Dr. Rodriguez Moody from the Jamaica Environment Trust, as well as Professor Michael Taylor from the University of the West Indies. Thank you both for joining us.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi. Thanks so much
I'm
for
hearing
having
you
us.
both. All right.
Thanks so much for having us.
Great. So I wanted to firstly ask, coming out of what we've just seen, how would you assess our, what should I say, the strategies that we have previously employed to ensure our resilience to events like these? And I'll start with you, Professor Taylor, and then to you, Dr. Moody.
Wow, what a hard question. I I would have to say that there are going to be lots of lessons that we are now learning. We're going to find, which I think is nothing that is going to surprise us, that there are lots of gaps. There are things that, people have been speaking about, certainly us as climate scientists, certainly, persons like Dr. Rodriguez Moody and her institution, things that we would have needed to have seen in place to ensure resilience. So longer term things that we would have wanted to have in place for when the kind of catastrophe that has happened. There are, of course, we have to say that there are also developments on the good side where we have seen things which we benefited from leading into this. But lots of gaps, lots of lessons to be learned, infrastructure-wise, communication-wise, filling vulnerability deficiencies that we knew existed before. This hurricane has only played upon a lot of the existing vulnerabilities and just thrown them wide open. And I think a lot of that analysis is going to be done, such as being done by your program now.
Thank you for that. Dr. Moody?
Yes, just to add to what Prof. Taylor has said, a Category 5 storm is not a small storm. Mm-hmm. And as we've heard, there's not a whole lot. Well, there are stuff that we can do, for sure. But we have to, it's important that when you're planning or when you're building, designing, you have to take these things into consideration, because we've always known that Jamaica was vulnerable. We've seen the climate projections. We've seen what is possible. And I think that there might have been, I want to say, I don't know if the term is complacency or inaction, but there's a lot we knew, and there's a lot we should have done, mm-hmm. and there's a lot we could have done, and there is a lot we did do. It's just that it is just a situation where storms like this, and I know Prof. Taylor would probably get into this a little bit more, but storms like these, this kind of intense storms are likely to become more of the norm if we don't do anything about the warming of the climate. So a lot of vulnerability studies have been done. There have been studies done for Savlamar, Black River, Montego Bay. They have areas that they know would be impacted by certain types of storms, by storm surge, by flooding. And we knew that certain critical infrastructure should not have been located in the places that they were in. Whether or not anything was done about that level of exposure is unclear, but we're seeing that possibly not much had been done. Mm-hmm. And we just, came with this storm. This storm came and really showed up a lot of our weaknesses. And I'm hoping, and this is something that we'll be speaking about in the coming days, that the rebuild does not look like we have to be radical. The climate crisis, as I prefer to call it, versus climate change, it requires a radical rethink, a radical change. We cannot continue to do things in the same way, because the level of exposure to these type of intense storms, droughts, it's not just the storms. We have the droughts, we have the extremes, and we need to do things differently.
Yeah. Professor Taylor, if you could expound on something Dr. Moody said, what we could have done, because we've heard the studies just now being mentioned in St. James, Westmoreland, and so on. What could we have done, and what should we do differently going forward?
Again, we're really beginning the analysis of this. Before I even pick up on that, something that Dr. Rodriguez Moody did say, this is our wake-up call in terms of what is possible from this current climate era. Now, the truth is, this is some are ranking it as the second strongest or the third strongest, but we knew that this was possible because the trends have been there. The science has been showing it. And this storm has all the markings of what a storm in a global warming era should look like. You couldn't miss the rapid intensification, that went from tropical storm to category 4, in twice the time that you used to even just define this. You couldn't miss the intense winds, the rainfall. All of these are kind of the markers of what is possible. But the truth is we live off memory. Mm-hmm. And so we live off the fact that the last one that went across us was Gilbert. And that even though we had Berry last year, most of Jamaica, was spared the worst, that it was only a part. And so, we tend to always believe we have a little bit more time. And I think that is the first kind of major gap. And so even when we're doing our strategic planning from at the government level, at the community level, even personally, we do it to a limit, certain extent, based on what we went through before and with a belief that we always have more time. Mm-hmm. Well, this is our wake-up call, and I'm agreeing with Dr. Rodriguez Moody that we now have to do things radically different. So we can just start with the infrastructure, and say, we know every new piece of infrastructure has to be radically different, But then we also have to go and look at all the infrastructure we already have in place, especially those critical pieces of infrastructure which are intended to survive and go. Some of them were built years ago. We now need to make sure that those retrofits are in place. And, the hospitals, the police station, the shelters that you want. And this is, of course, just the first look, We can go through and talk about all the other levels of vulnerability that we're going to have to actually act upon, the many reports that we have had about and the many strategies that we have put down, health, water, education, the fiscal strategies, etc. So I'm, just trying to create the picture that we have an abundance of knowledge, and we can pick a starting point that you want to start with. So let's start with infrastructure and start with going forward, but also going backwards and making sure that the deficiencies we begin to plug in a systematic way. But you could have started almost anywhere that you would like to start.
Yeah, as Professor Taylor was talking about the infrastructure, Jade, Dr. Rodriguez Moody, a thought came to mind. How do you strike that balance between the hurricane and that type of water disaster versus earthquakes and so on? How do you strike that balance? Because I can tell you, someone was saying to me, Mikkel, just ensure that your roof personally at home, it's concrete slab like what you have with the Portmore houses, for example. How do you strike that balance as we move forward?
Well, this is why you have hazard assessments that are done. So in some communities or in some sections of Jamaica, they're not always exposed to every single hazard. And the hazards for your listeners, we're talking about your hurricanes, your storm surge, your the wind damage and the rain. So you might be in a more interior hilly section. You may not be exposed to storm surge, so you don't necessarily need to build on stilts. So there are different. That's the purpose of these kind of hazard assessments, to identify what is the most likely, what the community or the area or the city, whatever it is that you're defining your space as, what is it most vulnerable to, and then you have to use that as your starting point to how you design. So if you're not exposed to heavy flooding, you wouldn't necessarily be expected to build your bridges, for example, to a 1 in 500 year design capacity. But if you're exposed to, because the kind of wind damage, where you're located on the island and exposure, the direction in which hurricanes might likely come from, you might change. You might say, all right, we need to focus on these type of windows. We don't use glass windows. We need to use aluminum. You must have shutters and so forth. slab roofs and so forth. So that's the importance of these studies. Unfortunately, what we tend to see a lot of times is studies are not necessarily used. They give you information, they're useful and so forth, but they're not always referred to when we were designing and building, as much as we really should.
And if I could just piggyback on that, I'm completely agreeing. And what Dr. Rodriguez Moody is referring to is the fact that we now need to allow the data, the information, the science, the expertise to guide us.
Yes, the drive
so
policy.
You have which is where I'm going now. So have the hazard mapping across Jamaica, where different places are zoned according to different hazards. That should then guide what and where you can build. The where is equally important, and how you can build, which then becomes part of the policy environment. And then there's the enforcement, which is the other side of it. Have to ensure that you enforce what you have learned and then put in place as policy.
Yes.
But we now have to make sure the information guides us. And I think this is teaching us that clear as day.
Hold that thought for us. I know Jade had a question, but I want us to pick up because while we're talking about how we move forward, just know it was good information for some of us, but the enforcement, the policy driver is where I want to pick up. How do we ensure that we call on the state to be guided by this data and improve, for example, building codes, the approval? We talk a lot about low-income families being, building houses in certain communities, but we don't speak enough about some of the middle-income communities. So let's take a break and we dive right into it.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
31 degrees Celsius here in Kingston, as well as 31 degrees Celsius out west in Montego Bay.
It's Monday. Get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
The E-Zone is here for you.
With the Stinger Honey Bee.
And Curry Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezone blinddates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblinddates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions. Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been discussing climate change, Hurricane Melissa, and the effects on Jamaica. I know that Professor Taylor was finishing up a point before the break.
No, I think you captured it. I was merely, especially from my capacity as a climate science person, and picking up on what Dr. Rodriguez Moody had said, was saying allowing for the science, the data, the studies to actually now inform the action, and I think that's critical. And it must go all the way from what kind of policies you put in place, but then when you've put those policies in place, also inform the enforcement as well,
Yeah.
That was the point I was trying to make.
And I particularly liked what Dr. Rodriguez Moody outlined earlier in terms of that zoning component, Dr. Moody. For example, if in a particular location, your building codes and so on may be different compared to another who may be more impacted by earthquake or wind or so on. Could you just break that down for us a little bit, Dr. Moody, just to expound on it? How would we get to that stage where us as citizens can be a part of it to say, listen, I heard Dr. Moody saying this on Nationwide JFJ's show. How do we call on the government collectively to get to that? And how do we, sorry for multiple questions here, but I also wanted to put in perspective as you were speaking, how do we ensure that us as citizens also adhere to these mechanisms if the government were to take heed to your call?
Yeah, well, in the development process, these are the development approval process. These are some things that should be taken into consideration. So, for example, hillsides, steep hillsides, you shouldn't allow, or hillsides that you know that are exposed to landslides, should not be allowed for, certain types of development shouldn't be allowed, even if you can engineer it all the way, because it also increases exposure for other people downstream of you. For example, what we see in Jackson.
Yes, yes.
We have to be thinking about, and so the development approval process, you can have everything on paper, but if we're not, you see that thing about enforcement, you can have your development orders, and your development orders are there for a reason, to guide how we develop, where we develop. And I'm not 100% sure if all of the development orders have been updated with these kind of hazard assessments, right? But you need to now ensure that, and I think we probably need to relook at these development orders to ensure that we're not, especially in the rebuild process, that we're not putting back these same critical structures or critical facilities, especially in these vulnerable zones. Because what it means is that it affects the resilience of a community. When your police buildings are damaged, your fire is damaged, your hospitals are damaged, what it means is that your ability for the community to deal with the aftermath of a disaster becomes extremely challenging. And very importantly, as individuals, you ask a question about individuals, you should also ensure that when you are putting up a structure, that these things are top of mind, because it is your investment, right? So I think that individuals do have a responsibility for how you build, where you build, what you choose to build, even if you think you might get approval for it. The point is that I think that this is we're in a changing climate. We're going to be dealing with extremes, as I said earlier, and the norm, the status quo, how we've done things for many years. And again, Prof said it. A lot of people say, well, when in Gilbert, I wasn't affected, so this is not going to be an issue for me. But you see, the thing is, we're seeing a complete difference in the type of storms that we're experiencing now. And if we don't curb the rising temperatures, the rising sea surface temperatures, the rising atmospheric temperatures, what we're going to see is more intense storms, and not just more intense storms, more extremes, right? You saw where September 19, Kingston flooded,
yes,
so significantly from just I don't know if it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours of rain.
Yes, our staff was our building was flooded at JFJ. Yeah. We had to be sweeping out water this Saturday, to show you. We were just we enjoyed KFC the afternoon, Dr. Moody, and then we decided, some of us, to work a little bit late on that Friday. And when I look on Twitter, I see New Kingston flooding out, then water rising in the office, just like that.
Yeah, so these are the things we talk about, the hurricanes, but let us not forget the ordinary periods of heavy rainfall. Let us not forget the drought that can just have those slow onset type things, that disasters that do have significant impacts on food security, on lives and livelihoods as well. So
and intense heat.
Right. How can we forget that?
I'm seeing a comment from one of our listeners, which is also a thought that we've all had, that as a small island developing state, we are not contributing to even a quarter of the impact that eventually causes these kinds of events. What can we do to ensure that those who are more responsible are providing that support to us? Because a lot of the things that we're discussing now will require not just, human resource investment, but also financial investment. And again, we're a small island developing state. So what role do these larger nations that have contributed so significantly to these issues should play? And how can we ensure that they play that role? And sorry,
Professor
that question
Taylor.
is for Professor Taylor, my bad.
Okay, sure. Well, one thing before I go down the line is just to say, I never want us to reach the point of, however, saying that we don't contribute enough and so we leave the responsibility entirely to others. And I'm not saying that the others are not to bear a large part of it, but it would go against all of what we have spoken about already in this conversation, that even though we have the least responsibility, we know our levels of vulnerability. And we can't sit back and decide that unless somebody else does something, we are not going to act. And so the things that we know we need to mainstream, the gaps we know we need to fill, the vulnerabilities which we mustn't leave so blatant, or even exploit, we have that responsibility, So we don't want to take, this is our survival. No, we need to be able to come out on the other side. However, I would agree that of things like this now become important things for us to make sure that we take to the global stage and therefore ask for the responsibilities to be met. Now, for example, from my side, one of the things that we need to do is there is a new science called detection and attribution, and we are now quickly working with our partners so that we can say exactly what climate change did in the case of Melissa, so that it is no longer just anecdotal. It is no longer, though the anecdotal is important and the video evidence and all of what we are capturing. And I'm going to speak about that, the need to capture this, because I don't know if Dr. Rodriguez Moody's is going to COP in what, a week and a half? Are you?
No, I'm not going to.
But certainly our negotiators will be there, and they need to go with the evidence of what Melissa has done.
Yes.
Because the things have been discussed, the adaptation fund, the need for mitigation, the loss and damage fund, we can explain all these things to your listeners, the climate justice and equity issues, especially coming out of the ICJ. But we now need to make sure we go with the evidence and demand the implementation side of these things, because we have enough discussion and it's really a move towards the implementation, and implementation taking our context into account. And I can't stress that enough. It's okay enough for developed countries to sit on board and make rules, but they don't have to make rules with a Jamaican context into account. So bearing in mind that, hey, we just got Category 5 Melissa. We're 8 months from the beginning of the next hurricane season. Beryl came at the beginning of our season. We still have a couple weeks left in this hurricane season to go. And we need the kind of ammunition, whether capital, financial investments, etc., technical expertise, so that we can do something even in the 8 months we have till the next hurricane season of sufficient standard that might, so that if we get another one, God forbid.
As you were speaking, Professor Taylor, sorry to interrupt, as you were speaking, a sharp headache just hit me when you said that 8 months away, a new season, we have a few weeks left. It's just so frightening.
It is frightening, but we know we can't just sit back and say, well, we have to make sure that when our P team goes to COP in 2 weeks, which is a global discussion, they are armed with everything to say, enough talk now, it's implementation time. And our CARICOM strategy, is pretty clear on what the ask is and, that kind of thing. So I'm arguing here a little bit for arming ourselves with the data and the science so that we can make the case in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Dr. Moody, as we close out, where do we go from here? Is there a call? What do we need to do? Because, as I said, this is just well, we've all been using the same term because there's nothing else we can say. This is a clear devastation and public health crisis is happening as we speak as a result. What can we collectively call on as we move forward?
So it's a lot to call on, eh? I think, and it feels really overwhelming when you look at it, and I really, I'm there, however we can support, we are trying to support those that are offering immediate, relief, in the following weeks from this storm. But we need to, as civil society, as scientists, as concerned individuals, we need to make our voice heard. We need to make sure that we don't just focus solely on what the impact of this storm is or has been, but we need to take the lessons learned and we need to use all the information, as Prof said, all the science. It is clear. The science is there. It is clear. We need to use that information, and we need to ensure that we don't go back to those broken systems. We don't go back to doing the same things over and over again. As I said, we need radical transformation. We need with the vision, we need that vision of has to be in place. So we must not just go at this in a way that is unplanned. We must understand the kind of vulnerabilities that we are faced with, different sections of South Coast, because Westmoreland may not necessarily have the same level of exposure as St. Elizabeth to other types of hazards. And so therefore, how do we go about planning for a more resilient future? And we need to make sure we plan for it and implement it. So it's not about doing the studies because we love to study things to death. We're not studying. It's not about doing the studying to death and then leaving them on a shelf. It's about using the studies to implement and do things better and in a much more radical way. Yeah. I don't know how else to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate having both of you on the program, and I trust that the listeners, we have heard, we heard you, and we join in support of the sentiments that have been expressed. Thank you so much, and continue to be safe.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so we take the break, and then Jade and I will pick up with some other discussions. I'm trying to get through to Joy Crawford of E for Life. I'm saying it publicly so that she can jump on. All right, we take the break.
Ready to turn your sales and marketing skills into high earnings? Nationwide 90 FM is searching for business development executives to help us grow our business and build lasting client relationships. If you have experience across all stages of the sales cycle and possess strong communication, negotiation, and time management skills with a proven sales track record, this opportunity is perfect for you. Join our team and work with the top corporate brands, media agencies, and of course, our on-air personalities. Enjoy networking opportunities, professional growth, and competitive commissions. Ready to take the next step? Send your resume to hr@nationwidenewsnetwork.com today.
It's hard-hitting. It's riveting. It's the much-talked-about cover story during Nationwide at 5. Here Cliff Hughes get to the heart of the story of the day. Cover Story, aired 5:30 weekdays during Nationwide at 5. Nationwide at 5. Talk radio at its best. Cover Story.
Cover Story is brought to you by JTA Credit Union, serving our members, impacting lives positively.
Multilink, roll with control. Use Multilink, safe, fast, and accepted in more locations.
right, welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We have on phone Joy Crawford, Executive Director and Co-Founder of E4Life. Joy?
Hi, good evening, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
I have mixed emotions, but I'm well mentally.
Yeah, all right, great. So for the listeners, Joy and I, we were talking earlier, Joy, and I just wanted you to just share some perspectives for the listeners for what people living with HIV affected by as well may be experiencing now, women and girls in communities. So we can spare a thought, put things in perspective for a particular vulnerability that may not have readily come to mind based on all of the other crises that we see happening. So if you could just share for the listeners, and then we get into it very quickly, what E4Life is doing as a response.
Sure, great. Thanks for the opportunity. Let's just start with the data. Right across the world, every time there is a disaster, whether natural or war, women and girls are always at the center along with children as those who are most vulnerable. So the response that we make right across UN, WHO will always tell you that we have to look out for the well-being of our women and girls, primarily because they are the primary victims of sexual violence and sexual assault. It's where the vulnerability lies. And that's something that we must take into consideration. Lessons learned from COVID in particular, when the country got locked down, our women and our girls were locked in with predators and people who would have abused them. They weren't able to get out or to go get help or seek shelter. And so we see the same happening. We expect to get the reports as the weeks go on. In terms of our children, of course, these are women who are, most of them are single mothers, in particular in the E4Life experience. They have 2-3 children. They don't have the capacity physically to, go into lines and to hustle and bustle amongst, who wants to get there quickly. They don't have the emotional capacity to bounce back because they're young. A lot of them have never experienced this at all. I mean, they're under 37, which was the time that was said we had our last major. And so this is all new for them.
And some of your beneficiaries, Joy, just to put in context, are survivors of sexual assault themselves. So
Exactly.
it's that fear of even leaving their children. I can just imagine how that is a multiplier effect.
And we are in a society where the opportunities, predators know where vulnerabilities are. So they'll offer to provide shelter, they offer to provide support, they offer to go get food packages for them at a cost. So this is something that we need to think about. How do we do this? Our children are very vulnerable. Again, during COVID and burial, the loss of the education gap.
Yes,
we need to think about that. Our elderly, we found that our elderly suffered a lot from depression because of the fear of not being able to start over and not having resources. So I do think that women, girls, and children who are in vulnerable situations. So in terms of HIV, sexual violence, before any disaster, this group and this population was already fearful of integrating in general services. Yes. That is why civil society is around. That's why Jamaica Support for Life is around. That's why Ash is around. That's why E4Life is around, Children First, because we have a community that we serve that is, we create a safe space for them because they're not able to access the larger general public spaces. And that is why we have partnerships with government who recognize this. Now, in the response, I think it's important for the institutions as they plan to include the said NGOs to meet these populations because we're the only ones who will reach them because of the issue of safety, the issue of being honored. So I think that's what I really want to put on the table and ask for.
Yeah. So, as you were speaking, I just want to list out these agencies because Joy will speak on behalf of E for Life. But Jamaica Aid Support for Life, if you go on their social media platform, you will see where they are mobilizing support. Jamaica Network of Seropositives, Jane Plus, Children First Agency, that's Claudette Richard Cepias, the Ashe Company.
I think I also saw We Change.
We Change, also Equality for All Foundation, focusing on the LGBTQI population. They need the support because these are individuals who have been ostracized before, and their vulnerability is twofold when you look at a natural disaster. So, Joy Crawford, what exactly is E for Life doing? How can we support publicly?
Okay, so right now we're in assessment mode. We have over 50 to 60 families. That are our target clients who are cut off. We're just getting, probably one or two communication people that don't still have light, no water, and more than anything, we have had several who have lost their physical home, including one person who reached out to me within the last 2 hours to say she was sleeping on cardboard because she's lost her home. And so this is very devastating for us. We also recognize, though, that there's a need for us to allow the authorities to do the cleaning and the clearing of the roadway because we don't have those capacities. What we really need is that we want persons to be able to come to our office space, which is 53 Renfield Drive, and donate stuff. Let us keep the stuff so that when the roads are open, we can get it to our constituents. We also have an online platform that you can donate money in. The link is on our pages. But right now what we're doing is just one, offering emotional support. That's the other thing. Mental health issues, hopelessness, depression, and of course if people already feel very marginalized, it's going to be very difficult. So that emotional support, access to the psychologist, we are providing that right now. But we are ready to go. We have boots on the ground. Yeah. But we also need cash because when we get stuff in order to rent vehicles to go to the country, and again, people might think, oh, well, why don't you use a regular one? Again, it's about safety, security, and the protection of privacy.
And the unique needs of the groups.
Of the population.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Joy. Greatly appreciate you coming on. So your web pages and your social media platform, it has the information.
Yes.
And we will be sharing it on the JFJ platform later today and tomorrow as well.
So remember, people can just come to the office and drop off their donation.
Yeah, 53 Renfield, that's off the boulevard. You can't miss it. If you're unable to get to Eve, just send us something on our platform as well. As I said, we're coordinating together, we're lending support, so we really ask individuals to join the call. Joy, another thing I want to say that people can also donate outside of the food is sanitary napkins because...
yes, everything. Sanitary napkins, blankets, and I'm very concerned also about our babies. Now, Jamaica is a breastfeeding nation, and we understand all the intricacies of formula in a time when you don't have running water and those things. However, we do have a population, which are women living with HIV, who are not breastfeeding and need formula.
Yes.
I do believe that there needs to be a space, for example, for E for Life, who have these young mothers to be one of the groups that have some kind of special arrangement because our clients are not breastfeeding. And do we now need to create more water support for them? What do we need to do? We need to provide them with additional bottles, whatever it is. But their children will starve. So I want to have that conversation as well with the powers that be, the Ministry of Health. How can we have a targeted program for our young mothers living with HIV in Jamaica?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joy. And again, we'll talk, and I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it. All the best to you.
Take care. Yeah, JDC, this is the thing. There's so many vulnerable groups. So it's not just the geographic space of how do we get into St. Elizabeth versus St. James and Westmoreland and so on. It's the particular needs that I think we have to speak about a little bit more.
I observed an incident yesterday that we'll discuss off air. But what has me also concerned, as Joy brought up the mental health support, a lot of parents, I would imagine, are succumbing to stressors in this time, and unfortunately the children are bearing the brunt of that increased stress. And so I'm a little bit concerned about the safety of children in these
As
kind
well,
of high stress environments as well. But again, hopefully once it is that, or again, I urge persons to stay off the roads as much as you can so that they are able to clear them, because I know that was one of the challenges that our emergency services were having, where individuals who were not a part of the emergency services were on the road while they were trying to work on it. So
because people want to give and we want to support.
Yes.
But we don't all have to give now.
Exactly.
And, the TikTokers and so on, who we're happy because we have that altruism, that intrinsic need to give and to support. But it's a balance, because some people, unfortunately, are motivated by taking photos, and you see the cameras in people's, you give her food and you're in the face. There are ethical things that we must be guided by, ethics and respect.
And to preserve
dignity
the dignity of these
people.
Exactly.
So I just want to caution individuals there. But continue to support. Is going to be a long haul. It's not going to be a sprint. And I'm hoping, Jade, next week when we come on, we can speak more about the educational impact, because we have not fully recovered from COVID educational loss. And I'm just fearful about the implications of what we expect to come in coming months in the St. Elizabeth, the Westmoreland, the St. James, places where schools will not be able to open anytime soon. So that disparity between the Kingston urban areas and the rural areas is going to be widened a bit, so...
Yes, there are a lot of things to consider.
There's so many things to consider. So I'm hoping next week we can focus on the educational impact.
Yes.
And as you rightly outline, our children and how they're coping in this time. I'm gesticulating a lot because the mental health, I'm also not 100% there. But, we give God thanks. Joy and I, we were quickly talking about the guilt Kingstonians are feeling, but we have to move from the guilt into action.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
It's not about us.
Exactly.
I lost light for a night. Move on.
What's the point of guilt if you don't help?
So move from guilt into action at this point. But we give God thanks, and where you're able to support, please do, but do it in a way that's coordinated and systematic, and working with established agencies.
Absolutely.
Is an important component for us to be cognizant of. All right, so who is the winner of the trivia?
I hope you can tell me. I can't
you're
connect
not,
to my service right now.
Give you the... She's not without data, listeners. It's just the cell signal not working for Jade in here.
Yes. So our winner for today's trivia was Bethan Witch 1190 on Nationwide's YouTube channel. Please send us a WhatsApp at 2397583 so that you can receive your prize. The question was, which years did we sign and then ratify the United Nations Convention on Climate Change? The answer was 1992 and 1995. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jade Williams.
My name is Michael Jackson. Continue to be safe.
By justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many, we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
Jamaica's poverty rate has dropped from 16.7% to 8.2%. As the government's economic program begins to pay off, our country is heading towards sustained growth. We are building Jamaica. The time by the office of the Prime Minister is
2 minutes after 2.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in